Talk to our sailor over here, George. You mentioned Minesweeper. Now that was a ship that saw a lot of action, and you said 90 men was a complement as a rule.
Yes, 90 men, John.
What kind of armament was on that ship?
We had a 16-inch gun forward and 2 Oerlikons, and of course depth charges.
Now those Oerlikons were like heavy machine guns.
Yes, yeah.
And a depth charge could do an awful lot of damage.
That's right.
And the other kind of ship that you were involved?
Corvette.
Well, now that's pretty famous. Corvettes, you know, were Navy to a lot of people who never got even close to the sea.
Corvettes really, I mean, say were the savior. I mean, like, you know, say in the Atlantic. I mean, they were, of course, I mean, I say escorted convoys, and they were the guard ships, you might say.
But a relatively small craft in comparison with some other ships.
A small craft. That's correct. Yeah.
And they were pretty heavily armed as well.
Well, they were armed, not really that. You know, no big. Well, they would have a large gun, yeah, a large gun forward. Let me say, and you know, guns on port and starboard side.
But
yeah.
Convoys played a very big role in World War II, did they not?
Oh yes, yeah. Say and convoys, of course, they played a very big role, and one of the things too. I mean, I say that. Well, the people who also played a big role, I mean, like I say, were merchant men, say we're merchant seamen, and not only on in the Atlantic, I mean, say, but also convoys. I mean, say that we're going to Russia, which was in Navy talk was known as the Murmansk Run.
Yes, I've heard about that.
And it's that was. Anyone who was in the Navy, I would say, like, you know, say, well, you know, they would like to get on the Murmansk Run. I say, believe it or not, they were at the first part of the war, while they were blowing merchant ships out of there, like, say, just say. Just tremendous losses. I mean, like I say, and when the German U-boats, I mean, like I say, were really, you know, at the beginning of the war, and the same thing, I say, with ships. I mean, like I say, in the Atlantic, in the Atlantic, and the corvettes. I mean, like I say, played a very important part. I mean, like I say, in escort duty.
Well, on that Murmansk Run, Russia wouldn't be what Russia was had it not been for the supplies that were shipped across, I gather was shipped across the Arctic, was it not?
That's correct, yeah.
Well, thank you for that. Is there an individual that you remember, the most memorable person that you met, as the Reader's Digest used to say? Anybody that sticks in your memory, or any place or thing that...
Oh, lots of them, John. It's over 53, 54 years now. I mean, and I still keep in contact. I mean, the beginning of September, I was out and visit a shipmate of mine, like I say, in Enderby, and I keep in touch. I mean, and I belong to White Ensign Naval Club in Winnipeg, and there's some of the fellows, let me say, like say that joined up. I mean, say that joined up, and we still who also belong to White Ensign, and we meet once a month, and I really look forward, we say, to to seeing them, and have made a lot of new friends. I mean, like I say, once a sailor, always a sailor, and so we have some great times. I mean, like I say, at these White Ensign meetings, it's just like old times.
And I gather that November 11th enables you to meet some of your old compadres again as well.
Well, yes, I'm Sergeant at Arms here in Branch 65, and so I commemorate, not celebrate, but commemorate. I mean, say Remembrance Day, say here. I mean, like say with my comrades. I mean, say in the Legion, but we celebrate. I mean, like say the Battle of Atlantic Sunday, which is the first Sunday in May, and I get into that.
And I imagine that you're prepared to endorse the Poppy campaign as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
We're going to learn more about the Poppy campaign in just a little bit, because I'm going to introduce you to the president of Branch 65 and find out just a little bit about the Poppy campaign and how important it is. But I tell you what, there's a piece of poetry that I'd like you to help me with here. This has been in the news lately. The McLean medals have created quite a stir and created quite an income for some individuals when they sold for $400,000. I should point out that John McCrae, a doctor, a poet, and a soldier, gave the English-speaking world a precious gift of understanding in his poem, Flanders Fields, and I'm quoting here from an editorial in the Winnipeg Free Press. A few stanzas of simple, powerful imagery that bring the terrible slaughter of the 1914-1918 war within the intellectual grasp of later generations, even now, 80 years after the event. So, Lyle, if you would be kind enough to read Mr. McCrae's poem, I'm sure it will enhance the proceedings this evening.
You'll have to excuse my very poor voice, but I like this poem. It's a very good poem. It's in Flanders fields the poppies blow, between the crosses, row on row, that mark our places, and in the sky the larks, still bravely singing, fly, scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you from failing hands we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If you break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields.
Thank you, sir. Canadian children, as we go back to the editorial in the Free Press with respect to McCrae's poem, Canadian children who have only a faint idea that many people died in a great war in Europe at least know about poppies. They know that every November people come around with bright red pins that are said to represent poppies, and this has something to do with death and hope. In time, they learn that the battlefield graveyards of Flanders bloomed with poppies between the rows of crosses where the armies buried their thousands of dead. The industrial scale slaughter of that war defies explanation, but the poignant image of the poppy gives modern civilians a way of glimpsing that old horror. John McCrae gave us that image, and his memory is honored accordingly. We'll take another short break, if we may, and then it will be my pleasure to introduce you to the president of Branch 65 of the Royal Canadian Legion and find out a little bit about the inner workings of the branch, the Legion, and how important poppies are to not only Legionnaires, but all of us Canadians living now in freedom because of those we must never forget. A Remembrance Day special continuing here on Review on Shaw Cable Channel 9. The president of Branch 65 joins me now. Kieth Hutchingson, welcome.
Welcome to you.
Tell me, Kieth, now we've talked about the poppy through the course of the show and what it means to various veterans. What does it mean to the Legion? Is it a fundraiser per se, or?
It's a fundraiser for the veterans, for the needy veterans.
This is not something that keeps the Legion going. This is a special separate fund, if I understand correctly.
This is a fund that is special, and it's separate. It's a trust fund that we hold, and to remove the money from this trust fund, we generally have to ask our command in Winnipeg, Manitoba Northwest Command, if we can donate this money to certain places.
Now, in times past, and indeed in times in the future, what are some of the people that have benefited from, some of the organizations perhaps more correctly, that have benefited from Branch 65 here?
These funds are totally turned back into our community. We have donated to the Regency Towers, the hospital. We are going to be donating some of it to Manor,
The Lions Manor.
Lions Manor and Douglas Campbell Lodge. And there's 2 other areas where we're donating this year. One's a Wish Fund, Children's Wish Fund. And, boy, you got me there.
Well, listen, we know that you're doing a good job with the funds that are realized. I think the important thing for folks to know is that these funds are going to good causes all the time.
We try to distribute them to good causes. No money is taken by the Legion. It is all turned back into the community. And
So your facilities here are more or less self-sustaining?
yes, sir.
And what kind of services does Branch 65 provide, not only to its members, but possibly to the public as well?
We have a wheelchair program. We have walkers that we loan out, and we have crutches. And I think that's about it for that.
Well, you have facilities in the building, for example, that I gather are available to the public on a rental basis. Is that not true?
Yeah, we rent the upstairs hall here to people, and the boardroom that we have, small meetings.
Okay. Well, thank you, sir, for joining us and giving us a little idea of what goes on with Branch 65 of the Royal Canadian Legion.
Sometimes we donate to certain people facilities here.
Thank you, sir. President Kieth Hutchingson of Branch 65, and that brings us to the bottom line of our show tonight. And this is a piece of poetry that has served me well over the years in broadcasts on Remembrance Day, and I would like to conclude the proceedings here on review by reading Don Crawford's poem for you. It's entitled, Why Wear a Poppy? Please wear a poppy, the lady said, and held one forth, but I shook my head. And then I stopped and watched as she offered them there, and her face was old and lined with care. But beneath the scars the years had made, there remained a smile that refused to fade. A boy came whistling down the street, bouncing along on carefree feet. His smile was full of joy and fun. Lady, said he, may I have one? When she'd pinned it on, he turned to say, why do we wear a poppy today? The lady smiled in her wistful way and answered, this is Remembrance Day, and the poppy there is the symbol for the gallant men who died in the war. And because they did, you and I are free. That's why we wear a poppy, you see. I had a boy about your size, with golden hair and big blue eyes. He loved to play and jump and shout. Free as a bird, he would race about. As the years went by, he learned and grew and became a man, as you will too. He was fine and strong, with a boyish smile, but he'd seemed with us such a little while. When war broke out and he went away, I still remember his face that day, when he smiled at me and said, goodbye. I'll be back soon, Mom, so please don't cry. But the war went on, and he had to stay, and all I could do was wait and pray. His letters told of the awful fight. I can see it still in my dreams at night, with the tanks and the guns and cruel barbed wire and the mines and the bullets and the bombs and the fire. Till at last, the war was won. And that's why we wear a poppy, son. The small boy turned as if to go, and then said, thanks, lady, I'm glad to know. That sure did sound like an awful fight. But your son, did he come back all right? A tear rolled down each faded cheek. She shook her head, but didn't speak. I slunk away in a sort of shame. And if you were me, you'd have done the same. For our thanks in giving is oft delayed, though our freedom was bought and thousands paid. And so, when we see a poppy worn, let us reflect on the burden borne by those who gave their very all when asked to answer their country's call, that we at home in peace might live. Then wear a poppy. Remember and give.